The Gilded Age promised American women unprecedented luxury in exchange for unprecedented submission. Marble palaces with gilded cages, unlimited shopping budgets with limited personal freedom, and social prominence that came at the cost of individual agency. For a generation of women, this bargain seemed golden until they discovered that their husbands' industrial fortunes had been built not just on coal and steel, but on the systematic subjugation of their wives' intelligence, ambition, and fundamental humanity. The awakening was gradual but devastating, as these women realized that their husbands viewed them as another acquisition to be managed, displayed, and ultimately controlled. Beautiful objects whose primary function was to reflect masculine success. What followed was a series of domestic insurrections that would shake the foundations of American high society, as wives who had been underestimated for decades unleashed carefully planned campaigns of social and financial warfare. They discovered that the same wealth that had imprisoned them could also liberate them, that the social connections they'd cultivated as ornamental duties could become networks of strategic power, and that destruction could be the ultimate form of self-creation. This is the story of women who refuse to remain beautiful casualties of their husband's success. Behind every great fortune lies a scandal, but Arabella Huntington's story contains enough controversial relationships to fuel an entire season of period drama television. This was a woman who understood that in Gilded Age America, strategic patience could transform any disadvantage into ultimate victory over the very people who tried to exclude you. Her ability to navigate complex romantic arrangements while building independent wealth demonstrates a level of long-term thinking that puts modern business strategists to shame. She proved that being permanently blacklisted from society's most exclusive circles meant nothing if you possessed the vision to create your own institutions that would educate and inspire future generations. Her transformation from social pariah to cultural icon represents one of history's most spectacular examples of turning prejudice into motivation for greatness. On today's episode of Old Money Allure, we investigate how Arabella Huntington used scandal as fuel to build a legacy that made her enemies irrelevant and her name immortal. Meet Arabella Duval Yarrington, a woman so determined to escape poverty that she would lie about everything from her birthday to her birthplace while executing one of history's most successful long-term relationship strategies. Born around 1850 in Richmond, Virginia, Arabella grew up in the kind of desperate circumstances that make people either give up entirely or become absolutely ruthless in their pursuit of something better. Her father died when she was 9, leaving her mother Catherine to operate a boarding house in Richmond's roughest neighbourhood, a district filled with hotels, brothels, gambling dens and slave auction houses, where respectability was a luxury the Yarrington family couldn't afford. But this harsh environment would prove to be Arabella's greatest asset, because it was here that she would encounter her destiny in the form of Collis P. Huntington, a railroad magnate 32 years her senior. Arabella was nothing if not a strategic thinker, and by 19 she had devised a plan so audacious it would have impressed the most calculating fortune hunters of her generation. In 1869, she entered into what appeared to be a marriage with John Archer Worsham, a gambling parlour operator who offered her the perfect cover for what she was really planning. The marriage was actually an elaborate deception designed to give Arabella respectability while allowing her to maintain her relationship with Collis Huntington, because Worsham was already married to another woman named Annette back in Richmond. This arrangement allowed Arabella to establish herself in New York society as the respectable Mrs. Worsham, while conducting what was essentially a 14-year audition for the role of Collis Huntington's wife. In 1870, Arabella gave birth to a son named Archer Milton Worsham, whose paternity would become one of the Gilded Age's most carefully guarded secrets. Most historians now believe that Collis Huntington was the biological father, making this child both a love child and a future heir to one of America's greatest fortunes. Conveniently, John Worsham died shortly after Archer's birth, though in reality he simply returned to Richmond and his legal wife, leaving Arabella free to claim widowhood and continue her relationship with Huntington. Arabella spent the next 14 years living as Collis Huntington's mistress, while he remained married to his first wife, Elizabeth, demonstrating a level of patience and strategic thinking that would have impressed military generals. During this period, she wasn't just sitting around waiting. She was actively building her own fortune through shrewd real estate investments that put her in direct competition with titans like William H. Vanderbilt and John D. Rockefeller. In 1877, she purchased property in New York that she later sold to John D. Rockefeller himself, proving that she could play the robber baron game just as effectively as the men who had invented it. She also began developing her passion for art collecting, filling her West 54th Street house with progressive French landscapes and aesthetic movement furnishings that would establish her reputation as a woman of sophisticated taste. But Arabella's most valuable investment was in her relationship with Collis Huntington, and she was about to discover that 14 years of perfect mistresshood would pay dividends beyond her wildest dreams. For 14 years, Arabella lived as Collis Huntington's mistress in what was essentially the world's longest and most expensive job interview for the position of railroad tycoon's wife. The arrangement was an open secret in New York society, yet Arabella found herself consistently excluded from elite circles dominated by families like the Astors and Vanderbilts, who considered her scandalous past utterly unforgivable. Society gatekeeper Ward McAllister was approached with a $9,000 bribe from Collis to provide introductions for Arabella, but when Collis balked at paying the full amount, McAllister leaked damaging gossip that ensured their permanent exile from New York's grandest ballrooms. Despite this social ostracism, Arabella used her time productively, demonstrating remarkable business acumen, while Collis showered her with extravagant gifts, including a rope of 119 blue diamonds from Tiffany's. When Elizabeth Huntington finally died in 1884, Collis wasted no time in making their relationship legal, marrying Arabella in his San Francisco home, with the ceremony performed by the famous Reverend Henry Ward Beecher. Beecher received 4 $1,000 bills as his fee for the ceremony, which was either extremely generous or the going rate for legitimizing 14 years of adultery in Gilded Age America. Collis formally adopted 14-year-old Archer at the time of the marriage, a move that was widely interpreted as his tacit admission of paternity and his desire to secure the boy's inheritance rights. Even marriage couldn't overcome the stigma of Arabella's past, and despite their immense wealth and Fifth Avenue address, the couple remained permanently excluded from the inner circles of New York high society. But Arabella was building something far more valuable than social acceptance. She was positioning herself to inherit one of America's greatest fortunes, while simultaneously developing the expertise that would make her one of the most influential art collectors of her generation. She spent lavishly during her marriage to Collis, including $300,000 on pearls in 1906, more than anyone else in the Western world had ever spent on jewellery at one time. Her personal expenses were equally extravagant, with over $4,000 spent on lingerie from a single Paris shop in 1912, because apparently even underwear needed to reflect her extraordinary lifestyle. When scandal sheet publisher William D'Alton Mann tried to print details of her past in 1905, Arabella paid him $15,000 to stay silent, then fled to Europe minutes ahead of a subpoena when Mann was sued for libel. When Collis P. Huntington died on August 13, 1900, at his Adirondack camp, Arabella's 14-year investment in being the perfect mistress and 20-year investment in being the perfect wife finally paid off spectacularly. She inherited more than $50 million, equivalent to approximately $1.9 billion in today's currency, making her not just one of the wealthiest women in America, but a legitimate billionaire by modern standards. The inheritance represented 2/3 of Huntington's vast railroad and industrial fortune, with the remaining third going to his nephew, Henry E. Huntington, setting up the next chapter of Arabella's extraordinary life. Nonetheless, Arabella wasn't content to simply enjoy her newfound wealth in quiet widowhood. She was about to shock even scandal-hardened Gilded Age society by marrying the one man guaranteed to cause maximum family drama. The most outrageous romance of Arabella's scandalous life began when she set her sights on the one man who could help her consolidate the entire Huntington fortune, her late husband's own nephew. With her inheritance making her worth approximately $1.9 billion in today's currency, Arabella had achieved the kind of wealth that could buy anything except the one thing she'd always been denied: complete social acceptance. But rather than spending her golden years quietly enjoying her fortune, the 60-something billionaire was about to embark on the most controversial relationship of her already scandalous life. Henry E. Huntington, Collis's nephew and business heir who had inherited the remaining third of the Huntington fortune, had admired Arabella for years and saw her widowhood as his opportunity to strike. After Collis's death, Henry separated from his wife and moved to the Metropolitan Club, just 3 blocks from Arabella's Fifth Avenue mansion, positioning himself for what would become one of the most strategic courtships in Gilded Age history. Henry's approach to winning Arabella was unique for the era. He pursued her through art purchases that demonstrated both his wealth and his understanding of her sophisticated tastes. His first major acquisition was a statement to this strategy. He spent $577,000 on French curtains called the Noble Pastoral at Arabella's urging, even before they were married. This amount exceeded the entire construction cost of his future San Marino mansion, proving that love, or at least the pursuit of consolidating 2 massive fortunes, makes people do financially irrational things. After a 7-year courtship that involved countless art purchases and strategic romantic gestures, Arabella finally accepted Henry's proposal in 1913. On July 16, 1913, the 63-year-old Arabella married the 63-year-old Henry at the American Church in Paris, creating one of the most scandalous unions in American high society history. The marriage shocked their social circles because it united the remaining Huntington fortune under one roof and represented the ultimate insider transaction between 2 people who already knew exactly what they were getting. More importantly for gossip-hungry society, it meant that Arabella had married her late husband's nephew, creating the kind of family drama that would have made modern tabloid editors weep with joy. Their prenuptial agreement, signed just 4 days before the wedding, protected both of their interests while allowing them to combine their collecting activities and create what would become one of America's greatest art collections. The marriage was both a business merger and a genuine love match, as evidenced by Henry's declaration in his 60s that, "I am just beginning to live, and life seems so very, very sweet." Together, they assembled one of the finest collections of 18th-century British art outside the United Kingdom, including gems like Gainsborough's The Blue Boy and Lawrence's Pinky. The couple spent $21 million between 1908 and 1917 on art, including works by Rembrandt, Velázquez, and other old masters that would become the foundation of their cultural legacy. But beyond their art collecting, the marriage represented something even more significant: Arabella's final triumph over the social prejudices that had excluded her for decades. By marrying Henry, she not only consolidated 2 fortunes, she had positioned herself to create something that would make every society family who had ever snubbed her completely irrelevant to history. What Arabella accomplished through her marriage to Henry would prove that the woman once excluded from every important ballroom in New York was about to build something more enduring than all their reputations combined. The marriage between Arabella and Henry Huntington became the foundation for creating a cultural legacy that would make their names immortal long after the society families who had scorned them were forgotten. Arabella spent her final years dividing time between New York, Paris, and California. Though she preferred the cultural sophistication of Paris and New York to the West Coast estate that Henry was developing, she limited her stays at the San Marino ranch to just 2 months per year, forcing the devoted Henry to follow her across the country and across the Atlantic to maintain their relationship. Her art collecting reached extraordinary heights during this period, including a $2.5 million acquisition from the Rodolphe Kahn collection through dealer Joseph Duveen that represented one of the largest private art purchases in American history. Beyond art, Arabella proved herself to be a forward-thinking philanthropist who supported causes that reflected her personal values and experiences as a woman who had fought her way up from poverty. She supported the women's suffrage movement by providing financial backing rather than marching herself, understanding that her money could be more effective than her personal participation in protests. She donated generously to institutions including Harvard Medical School, Hampton Institute, the American Geographical Society, and the Hispanic Society of America, which was founded by her son, Archer. Her spending habits remained spectacularly extravagant throughout her final years, including $3,112 on skincare in 1921 and $6,349 on wardrobe alterations in 1923. These amounts, equivalent to $57,000 and $116,000 respectively in today's currency, proved that even in her 70s, Arabella understood that maintaining her appearance was essential to maintaining her influence. Henry's vision for their collections was always public-minded, and even before Arabella's death, he had begun planning to transform their San Marino estate into a public institution that would educate and inspire future generations. When Arabella died on September 16, 1924, in New York City at age 72 to 74, she left behind more than just a massive fortune and incredible art collection. She had proven that a woman born into poverty in a Richmond boarding house could not only achieve extraordinary wealth, but could also create institutions that would educate and inspire people for generations. Henry died 3 years later in 1927, and both are buried in a circular white marble temple called the Temple of the Four Seasons, designed by John Russell Pope as a precursor to the Jefferson Memorial. The Huntington Library Art Collections and Botanical Gardens stands today as Arabella's most enduring legacy, housing nearly 9 million manuscripts and books, world-class art collections, and 120 acres of botanical gardens. The institution welcomes over 750,000 visitors annually and supports more than 1,700 researchers, proving that Arabella's vision extended far beyond her own lifetime. Her transformation from a southern boarding house operator's daughter to one of America's most influential cultural philanthropists represents the ultimate Gilded Age success story and the final victory over every society family that had ever dared to exclude her. Through her strategic relationships, shrewd investments, and cultural vision, Arabella Huntington created a legacy that continues to educate and inspire more than a century after her death, proving that the best revenge against social prejudice is building something so magnificent that history remembers you while forgetting your enemies entirely. The most dangerous place for a beautiful woman in Gilded Age America wasn't a dark alley or a rough neighborhood. It was a yacht party filled with wealthy gentlemen competing for her attention. High society gatherings might have featured crystal champagne flutes and string quartets, but they operated by rules more ruthless than any criminal underworld. When aristocratic men discovered they couldn't purchase the one thing they truly wanted, their response often made street thugs look positively civilized by comparison. The combination of unlimited resources, scientific knowledge, and wounded pride created a toxic mixture that could destroy lives with surgical precision. One woman learned that choosing love over money in these circles doesn't just mean giving up luxury. It means becoming the unwitting centre of a revenge plot, so elaborate it would have impressed medieval poisoners. Her romantic decisions would ultimately expose how thin the veneer of civilization becomes when privilege meets rejection. In today's episode of Old Money Allure, I'll take you through a love story that became a masterclass in how wealth and jealousy can turn deadly. On a sun-drenched afternoon in 1897, aboard the luxurious yacht Monhegan, cruising the pristine waters off Maine's coast, a chance encounter would set in motion a chain of events culminating in double murder and one of America's most notorious criminal trials. Blanche Chesbrough, an enchanting, aspiring opera singer from Lebanon, Pennsylvania, possessed the rare combination of breathtaking beauty and genuine musical talent that made her the center of attention wherever New York's social elite gathered. Born around 1874 to James Francis Cheeseborough and Harriet Newell Crumb, she had arrived in Manhattan with dreams of operatic stardom, performing with the Musical Arts Society at the prestigious Carnegie Hall despite her family's modest financial circumstances. Though contemporary critics suggested her vocal abilities were somewhat limited, her ethereal presence and captivating stage manner had already begun opening doors among the city's cultural patrons who appreciated both her artistic aspirations and her striking appearance. At that fateful Maine yachting party, she met Roland Burnham Molineux, heir to one of Brooklyn's most distinguished families and son of Civil War General Edward Leslie Molineux, whose military service had elevated the family to prominence within New York's established society. Roland, born in 1866, represented everything that Gilded Age America celebrated: wealth, breeding, education, and social connections that opened every door in the city's most exclusive circles. His residence at the family's fashionable Fort Greene address at 117 Fort Greene Place reflected their status among Brooklyn's aristocratic families, while his membership in Manhattan's prestigious Knickerbocker Athletic Club provided entree to the city's most influential gentlemen. Working as a chemist at his father's successful paint company, F.W. DeVoe and C.T. Reynolds, Roland possessed specialized knowledge of exotic chemicals and rare compounds used in manufacturing processes, expertise that would later prove devastatingly significant. His access to dangerous substances like cyanide of mercury, routinely employed in paint production, distinguished him from typical wealthy young men who dabbled in business without acquiring technical skills. Roland's lifestyle epitomized turn-of-the-century privilege: summers yachting in Bar Harbor, winters attending exclusive social functions, and year-round participation in the rarefied world of Manhattan's elite clubs and societies. When he introduced Blanche to his close friend Henry Crossman Barnett at various Knickerbocker Club gatherings, Roland inadvertently orchestrated what would become his own romantic undoing. Barnett, a 32-year-old stockbroker with offices at 19 Broad Street, possessed the kind of charm and worldly sophistication that immediately captivated the beautiful singer. Described as having brown hair, blue eyes, and a neatly trimmed moustache complementing what observers delicately termed a decided paunch, Barnett had joined the athletic club hoping to improve his physical condition, but instead discovered something infinitely more compelling. The attraction between Blanche and Henry was instantaneous and overwhelming, transforming Roland's trusted friend into his most dangerous rival. Blanche would later describe Henry's influence over her as irresistible, recalling how he had swept me off my feet from their very first meeting. Their relationship quickly deepened beyond mere flirtation, becoming an intimate connection that would ultimately seal Henry's fate while binding Blanche to a nightmare from which she would struggle to escape. October 1898 brought a pivotal moment that would transform romantic disappointment into murderous obsession when Roland Molineux, confident in his wealth and social position, formally proposed marriage to Blanche Chesbrough. His proposal represented more than romantic desire. It embodied the entitled expectation of a man accustomed to acquiring whatever he coveted through the simple application of privilege and financial resources. Roland's shock was profound when Blanche rejected his offer with devastating directness, declaring without equivocation that her heart belonged entirely to Henry Barnett. For a man raised to believe that his aristocratic heritage and substantial fortune guaranteed success in all endeavours, this rejection struck at the very foundation of his identity and self-worth. The humiliation festered within Roland's mind, transforming wounded pride into something far more sinister as he contemplated the unthinkable reality that his closest friend had succeeded where he had failed. Late in October 1898, Henry Barnett received what appeared to be a routine promotional sample at his Knickerbocker Athletic Club address. A small tin of Kutnow's improved effervescent powder marketed as a harmless digestive remedy. Such unsolicited samples were commonplace among pharmaceutical companies seeking to introduce their products to potential customers, making the package seem entirely unremarkable. On October 28th, Henry consumed a dose of the powder, expecting nothing more than possible relief from digestive discomfort that might assist his ongoing efforts to reduce his weight. Instead of improvement, he experienced the onset of violent illness that would persist with increasing severity until his death on November 10th, 1898, just 13 days after taking the fatal dose. During his agonizing final weeks, Henry mentioned to his attending physician, Dr. Henry Beeman Douglas, the mysterious powder he had received, providing a crucial detail that would later expose the murder plot. Dr. Douglas initially diagnosed the death as cardiac asthenia induced by diphtheric poisoning, a misattribution that allowed the crime to remain undetected for months. The symptoms of mercury poisoning closely resembled diphtheria in certain stages, creating plausible medical cover for what was actually deliberate assassination. However, Dr. Douglas had retained the powder container, and subsequent chemical analysis revealed the presence of cyanide of mercury, a rare poison accessible to someone with Rowland's specialized knowledge of industrial chemicals. When authorities later exhumed Henry's body on February 28, 1899, tissue analysis confirmed the presence of the deadly compound, establishing definitive proof of murder. Remarkably, just 8 days after Henry's death, Rowland again proposed to Blanche, perhaps calculating that her romantic dreams now necessarily involved him rather than her deceased lover. Whether motivated by grief, shock, or pragmatic recognition that her artistic ambitions required financial backing, Blanche accepted his second proposal. Their wedding took place on November 29, 1898, a mere 19 days after Henry's funeral, timing that would later appear damning to investigators and prosecutors. The unseemly haste suggested to authorities that Rowland had eliminated his romantic rival specifically to clear his path to Blanche's hand, transforming murder into a calculated courtship strategy. Blanche's transformation from aspiring opera singer to Mrs. Rowland Molineux elevated her social status dramatically, but it also made her an unwitting participant in what prosecutors would characterize as premeditated murder. Their marriage celebration marked not a romantic triumph, but the successful conclusion of Rowland's first act of revenge, setting the stage for even deadlier schemes targeting those who had crossed his path. While Rowland's marriage to Blanche provided the romantic satisfaction he had sought through murder, his social relationships continued deteriorating due to his consuming hatred for Harry Seymour Cornish, athletic director of the Knickerbocker Club. Their antagonism had grown so intense that Rowland had resigned his membership in 1897 when fellow members refused to dismiss Cornish, whom he publicly denounced as fundamentally unsuitable for his position. Rowland's objections seemed rooted in class prejudice, viewing Cornish as representing unwelcome working-class intrusion into spaces traditionally reserved for society's elite. The holiday season of 1898 would provide Rowland with an opportunity to settle this festering grievance through methods he had already proven devastatingly effective. On December 23rd, Harry Cornish received what appeared to be an elegant Christmas gift at the Knickerbocker Athletic Club, a package that would soon demonstrate Rowland's escalating boldness in pursuing his vendettas. The beautifully presented box from Tiffany & Company contained a silver toothpick holder accompanied by a bottle labelled Emerson's Bromo Seltzer, seemingly an authentic headache remedy. Unknown to Cornish, sophisticated chemical analysis would later reveal that the bottle contained legitimate Bromo Seltzer powder, carefully mixed with lethal quantities of cyanide of mercury. This deadly preparation required both access to rare poisons and sufficient chemical knowledge to create an undetectable mixture, capabilities that Rowland's professional background provided in abundance. Cornish brought the gift home to his shared lodgings with 62-year-old Catherine Adams, his distant cousin, and her daughter Florence, establishing an innocent household as the setting for Rowland's next murderous scheme. The morning of December 28th brought Catherine Adams a severe headache that would tragically become her final earthly suffering. When Florence suggested using the Bromo Seltzer that Cornish had received as a gift, Catherine gratefully accepted what appeared to be standard household medicine. Cornish prepared the fatal dose by mixing a heaping teaspoonful of the powder with water, creating the concoction that would end an innocent woman's life within minutes of consumption. Catherine drank the entire mixture, trusting completely in what seemed like ordinary headache relief. Almost immediately she began experiencing violent reactions that brought screams, attracting the entire household, as the poison began its deadly work. The mixture reportedly emitted an almond-like odour characteristic of cyanide poisoning, though this warning sign went unrecognised by those desperately trying to help her. Medical assistance arrived quickly, but Catherine Adams died shortly after the doctor's arrival, becoming an unintended victim of Rowland's murderous campaign against Harry Cornish. Cornish himself tasted the mixture and fell ill, but prompt medical intervention by Dr. Hitchcock, who recognised cyanide poisoning symptoms, saved his life through rapid administration of antidotes. The cruel irony was unmistakable. Rowland had succeeded in committing murder, but had killed an innocent elderly woman rather than his intended target. This case of mistaken victimhood would ultimately strengthen the prosecution's case by demonstrating Rowland's callous disregard for innocent life in pursuing his personal vendettas. The Christmas gift had delivered death instead of holiday cheer, transforming what should have been a season of celebration into a tragedy that would soon expose Rowland's murderous obsessions to the full scrutiny of American justice. Catherine Adams's senseless death marked the moment when Rowland's private grievances became public crimes that would ultimately destroy his carefully constructed life of privilege and respectability. Captain McCluskey assumed command of the investigation on December 29, 1898, immediately focusing on Harry Cornish as the intended victim and seeking suspects with both motive and means for such sophisticated poisoning. Investigators quickly identified Blanche Molineux as their prime suspect based on compelling circumstantial evidence. His public feud with Cornish, his expert knowledge of exotic chemicals, his employment at a facility using cyanide of mercury, and his customer account at Tiffany where the silver toothpick holder originated. The prosecution constructed their case around cutting-edge handwriting analysis, summoning over a dozen expert witnesses to testify that identical penmanship appeared on address labels for both the cut-now powder sent to Barnett and the bromo seltzer package delivered to Cornish. This forensic evidence, though later questioned for reliability, represented the most advanced investigative techniques available and formed the centerpiece of what prosecutors believed was an unassailable case. Rowland's arrest on February 27, 1899, followed a coroner's inquest into Catherine Adams's death that had successfully connected her murder to Henry Barnett's earlier poisoning, revealing a pattern of calculated killing. The subsequent trial, beginning in November 1899 and concluding in February 1900, became the longest and most expensive criminal proceeding in New York history, captivating national attention. Media coverage reached unprecedented levels as newspapers engaged in fierce competition for the most sensational reporting, with the New York World and New York Journal leading the charge in what became known as yellow journalism. Prosecutor James W. Osborne built his strategy around circumstantial evidence and scientific testimony, controversially introducing details about Henry Barnett's death to establish Rowland's pattern of behaviour and demonstrate clear motive. The defence team, led by George Gordon Battle and Bartow Weeks, employed the startling strategy of presenting no witnesses or evidence, declaring simply that the prosecution has failed to establish its charge. This calculated gamble aimed to highlight weaknesses in the circumstantial case while avoiding any testimony that might provide additional ammunition for prosecutors. On February 10, 1900, the jury convicted Rowland of first-degree murder, sentencing him to death and making him one of Sing Sing's most notorious death row inmates. While awaiting execution, Rowland authored The Room with the Little Door, a haunting memoir of death row existence that criticised the criminal justice system while revealing unexpected depth and humanity. His literary efforts demonstrated intellectual capabilities that contradicted public perceptions of him as merely a pampered aristocrat. showing genuine empathy for fellow condemned prisoners from vastly different social backgrounds. On October 15, 1901, the New York Court of Appeals delivered a landmark reversal that would reshape American criminal law for generations. The appellate court ruled that introducing evidence about Henry Barnett's death violated fundamental principles of presumed innocence, since Rowland had never been formally charged with that crime. This decision established the Molineux rule, strengthening defendants' rights by prohibiting prosecutors from introducing evidence of uncharged crimes to support their cases. Rowland's second trial began on October 13, 1902, with the prosecution significantly weakened by the exclusion of prejudicial evidence about Barnett's murder. After deliberating for merely 13 minutes, the jury acquitted Rowland on November 11, 1902, suggesting that circumstantial evidence alone was insufficient to establish guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The swift acquittal demonstrated how the appellate court's decision had fundamentally altered the case's dynamics, transforming what seemed like certain conviction into rapid exoneration. One week after Rowland's acquittal, Blanche filed for divorce in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, on November 18, 1902, citing mental cruelty as grounds for dissolving their scandal-scarred marriage. Her timing indicated careful planning, waiting until legal proceedings concluded before taking action that might have complicated Rowland's defense or forced her testimony against him. The divorce proceedings in September 1903 officially ended a union that had begun with murder and been sustained through years of imprisonment, trials, and public humiliation. Within 2 months of gaining her freedom, Blanche married Wallace D. Scott, the attorney who had represented her in the divorce, choosing both practical security and genuine affection over her traumatic past. Scott offered respectability and stability that her notorious first marriage had obliterated, providing sanctuary from the relentless publicity that had transformed her from unknown singer into America's most talked-about woman. Blanche attempted returning to entertainment in 1905, planning a vaudeville career under the name Blanche Molineux. But Rowland's legal threats over unauthorized use of his surname forced abandonment of her theatrical dreams. This final cruel irony demonstrated how their connection continued haunting her even after divorce, effectively destroying her last hope of reclaiming the artistic career that had originally brought her to New York. Following this setback, Blanche deliberately retreated from public attention, living quietly until her death in 1954 at age 80. Her conscious withdrawal from society reflected determination to escape the notoriety that had made her a household name throughout America during the early 1900s. Rowland attempted rebuilding his shattered life, marrying Margaret Connell in a New York courthouse ceremony on November 7, 1913. But years of imprisonment and scandal had severely damaged his mental stability. He continued writing after his release, publishing short stories in major newspapers and crafting a play titled The Man Inside, based on his prison experiences. However, the psychological strain of attempting to stage his theatrical work overwhelmed his already fragile mental condition. On September 7, 1914, Rowland was committed to an asylum following a series of devastating mental breakdowns that rendered him incapable of caring for himself. Medical authorities diagnosed his condition as paresis, a form of neurosyphilis, causing progressive mental deterioration often associated with the dissolute lifestyle he had pursued in his youth. Rowland died in institutional care on November 2, 1917, at age 51, his brilliant mind destroyed by disease that had slowly consumed his cognitive abilities. The Molineux case established enduring legal precedents still cited in modern criminal trials, including recent high-profile cases involving similar issues of prejudicial evidence. For American society, the trial represented a watershed moment, demonstrating that wealth and privilege could not ultimately shield individuals from justice when their crimes shocked the public conscience. Blanche's story serves as a haunting reminder of how romantic choices can entangle innocent people in webs of violence beyond their control or comprehension. Her 50-year retreat from public life following the trials suggests the profound psychological scars left by her unwitting participation in one of America's most sensational criminal cases. The tragedy illustrates how quickly promising lives can be destroyed when love becomes tangled with jealousy, privilege, and the deadly capabilities of those who refuse to accept rejection. Most people think the Kardashians invented using marriage as a business strategy, but they're about a century and a half late to that particular party. Alva Vanderbilt perfected the art of matrimonial mergers long before prenups and reality TV cameras made such arrangements socially acceptable, treating high society like a conquerable fortress that just needed the right siege tactics. While modern celebrities might shock the world by divorcing after 72 days, 19th century society wives were expected to maintain their marriages even if their husbands collected mistresses like some men collect vintage wines. Breaking those rules required the kind of audacity that would make today's social media influencers seem positively timid by comparison. One woman possessed exactly that level of calculated boldness, along with enough strategic genius to turn a scandalous divorce into the foundation for reshaping American society. In today's episode of Old Money Allure, we reveal how one person's refusal to stay quietly miserable in a marble palace accidentally helped change the course of American history. If the Gilded Age had casting directors, they couldn't have picked a more perfect villain-heroine than Alva Erskine Smith. Born January 17, 1853 in Mobile, Alabama, to a cotton merchant whose Civil War losses would have made Gone with the Wind look like a minor inconvenience, Alva possessed the ambition of a military general and the social radar of a heat-seeking missile. The Vanderbilts, meanwhile, were America's wealthiest social rejects. Their new money railroad fortune, a jaw-dropping $94 million at the time, might as well have been Confederate currency at Mrs. Astor's legendary balls. The old guard Knickerbockers saw them as glorified train conductors, their bank accounts having the unfortunate aroma of coal and commerce rather than generations of inherited wealth. Enter William Kissam Vanderbilt, born December 12, 1849, a man whose temperament was as mild as his bank account was robust. Contemporaries described him as friendly, cultured, and even-tempered, which in the cutthroat world of Gilded Age marriages made him the perfect cash cow for an ambitious bride. Their 1875 wedding merged Alva's steel-trap social intelligence with William's bottomless bank account, a corporate merger disguised as a marriage. They produced 3 children, Consuelo, William Kissam, and Harold Sterling, while maintaining what modern therapists would diplomatically call irreconcilable differences. Historical accounts paint Alva as strong-willed, arrogant, ill-tempered, opinionated, liberated, and tyrannical. She reportedly dismissed her husband as a weak non-entity and called marriage legalized prostitution, sentiments rarely found in Victorian valentines. William, for his part, seemed content to fund his wife's social campaigns while spending as much time as possible aboard his yachts in the Mediterranean. When William Henry Vanderbilt died in 1885, leaving his son $65 million, roughly equivalent to Jeff Bezos finding loose change under his sofa cushions, Alva unleashed her master plan for social domination, her opening salvo, a French chateau-style mansion on Fifth Avenue, so ostentatious it made Versailles look like a starter home. But the pièce de résistance in Alva's social warfare came on March 26, 1883, when she hosted a costume ball so lavish that its $250,000 price tag would make even modern Met Gala attendees clutch their pearls. The guest list was meticulously engineered with one target in mind, forcing Caroline Astor, New York's reigning social queen, to acknowledge the Vanderbilt's existence or doom her daughter to missing the event of the decade. Mrs. Astor capitulated, leaving her calling card at the Vanderbilt Mansion, the 19th century equivalent of being accepted into Harvard. Every newspaper in New York covered the triumph, and Alva's position as a social force was secured. She followed this victory by helping found the Metropolitan Opera as a direct challenge to the exclusive Academy of Music, which had excluded nouveau riche families like the Vanderbilts. Her crowning architectural achievement was Newport's Marble House, completed in 1892 at a cost that would make modern billionaires flinch. $11 million, with $7 million spent on marble alone. Designed as a temple to the arts, locals more accurately saw it as a temple to the almighty dollar. While Alva conquered society room by room, William found comfort elsewhere, establishing the Jockey Club, racing thoroughbreds, and allegedly enjoying the company of mistresses. Most deliciously scandalous were rumours of his affair with Consuelo Isnaga, the Duchess of Manchester, who happened to be Alva's childhood friend. The irony that his alleged mistress shared a name with his daughter provided endless fodder for society gossips. As the 1890s dawned, Alva had achieved everything she wanted: social dominance, architectural monuments to her ambition, and entree to every exclusive drawing room in New York and Newport. But beneath her triumph lurked a radical realization. She no longer needed William or his name. The social climbing scaffolding could now be dismantled, leaving only the question of how to exit a high-profile marriage without sacrificing her hard-won position. The answer would shock American society and ultimately help build its future. When most Gilded Age wives were perfecting needlepoint and producing heirs, Alva Vanderbilt was orchestrating social coups that would have impressed Machiavelli. Her infamous 1883 costume ball wasn't just a party. It was psychological warfare disguised as a social event, with every detail calibrated for maximum impact. The ball itself made modern celebrity galas look like kindergarten birthday parties. 1,200 guests arrived in costumes costing small fortunes. Mrs. Cornelius Vanderbilt II came dressed as an electric light bulb, complete with working battery, while Alva herself appeared as a Venetian Renaissance princess. The entire affair cost over $250,000, more than $5 million in today's currency, and transformed the Vanderbilts overnight from social outsiders to the epicenter of New York society. With society's gates successfully stormed, Alva advanced to her next objective: architectural dominance. The Fifth Avenue mansion featured a ballroom modelled after Versailles' Hall of Mirrors because subtlety was never Alva's strong suit. But her true monument to excess was Newport's Marble House, completed in 1892 at a cost of $11 million. With 500,000 cubic feet of marble, the cottage, Newport's charmingly misleading term for mansions, required 150 craftsmen working for 4 years. One visitor described it as a palace that makes the proud edifices of American royalty look like tenements. Between social triumphs and architectural statements, Alva revolutionized American culture by helping found the Metropolitan Opera in 1883. This direct challenge to the Academy of Music, which had limited boxes and excluded nouveau riche families, created a new cultural institution where wealth trumped lineage in securing the precious boxes that signified social arrival. While Alva waged her campaigns for social supremacy, William pursued his own interests with equal dedication. He established the Jockey Club, maintained racing stables, and spent increasingly little time in the marble palaces his wife was commissioning. Their marriage operated less like a romance and more like a business partnership with clearly defined roles. William provided unlimited funding, Alva provided the strategic vision for deploying it effectively. As the 1890s dawned, with her social position secure, Alva shifted focus to her daughter Consuelo's future. Pretty, wealthy, and now carrying the socially validated Vanderbilt name, Consuelo represented the ultimate trophy in Alva's social chess game. European aristocracy, cash poor but title rich, presented the perfect opportunity for a final social conquest that would transcend American shores. Meanwhile, William's interests increasingly drew him across the Atlantic as well, though for rather different reasons. His rumoured affair with Consuelo Isnaga, the Duchess of Manchester, provided endless whispers in drawing rooms on both continents. Society wits couldn't help noting the peculiar coincidence that his alleged mistress shared a name with his daughter, a fact that would have made Freudian analysts reach for their notebooks. The Vanderbilts' marital arrangements grew increasingly separate, with William aboard his yacht and Alva presiding over Newport's social season. She had effectively achieved independence within marriage, controlling vast resources, commanding social respect, and operating with minimal interference from her husband. The question lingering in the background was whether she still needed the Vanderbilt name at all, a potential catalyst for change appeared in the form of Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont, a wealthy family friend whose attention to Alva raised eyebrows in social circles. Whether their relationship began before or after her marital troubles deepened remains debated, but Belmont would soon play a crucial role in Alva's next social revolution. By early 1895, to 20 years of strategic marriage, both Vanderbilts had extracted what they needed from their union. William had secured his family's social position through Alva's machinations, while she had leveraged his fortune to achieve unprecedented social power. The stage was set for a dissolution that would shock society and establish new precedents for wealthy women seeking independence from unsatisfactory marriages. The woman who had conquered New York society was about to attempt her most daring maneuver yet, and American society would never be quite the same again. In March 1895, Alva Vanderbilt did something more shocking than wearing last season's fashion. She filed for divorce from William K. Vanderbilt on grounds of adultery. The news hit New York society like a locomotive at full steam, leaving diamond-encrusted monocles shattering across Fifth Avenue. Divorce in 1895 wasn't just scandalous, it was practically extraterrestrial among the social elite. When marriages soured, high society couples typically opted for discreet separation. He kept a mistress in Paris. She developed mysterious headaches, and both attended the same social functions with glacial politeness. Alva's decision to pursue a complete legal dissolution revealed the same tactical boldness that had characterized her social ascent. New York state law made divorce exceptionally difficult, with adultery standing as the only legal grounds until 1966. For most wives, this created an insurmountable barrier. But Alva had an ace up her silk sleeve. William's extramarital activities were apparently so well documented they could have filled a moderately sized library. Some historians suggest William may have cooperated in the proceedings, possibly even arranging for a mistress stand-in to provide the necessary evidence without excessive scandal. Divorce by mutual arrangement disguised as moral outrage. The legal team operated with the secrecy of a military operation. Alva's lawyer later boasted about keeping court records sealed, noting with satisfaction that journalists were indignant not to be able to get any of the particulars, and that there has been no filth in sight. The whole thing has been kept profoundly secret. In an era when the penny press turned divorce trials into public entertainment, this discretion was both unusual and strategic. The financial settlement rewrote the rules for high society divorces. Alva secured an estimated $10 million, a sum that would make modern prenuptial lawyers weep with joy, along with custody of their 3 children and several properties, including Marble House. This unprecedented arrangement demonstrated both the vastness of the Vanderbilt fortune and Alva's extraordinary negotiating position. The social consequences were swift and severe. Society women cut Alva at church, pretending not to see her with a thoroughness that would make modern ghosting seem amateur. Invitations vanished, doors closed, and the social world she had conquered through decades of careful maneuvering seemed to crumble overnight. Yet unlike most divorced women who faced permanent social exile, Alva had prepared her counterattack. With vast wealth, multiple properties, and most importantly, a strategic brilliance that had already conquered society once, she was uniquely positioned for a comeback. Her position was strengthened by 2 crucial factors. She had initiated the divorce rather than suffering the humiliation of abandonment, and the grounds were William's infidelity rather than any moral failing of her own. Even while navigating social rehabilitation, Alva orchestrated another triumph: the marriage of her daughter Consuelo to Charles Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke of Marlborough. Scheduled for November 1895, just 8 months after her divorce, this transatlantic alliance represented the ultimate social achievement, merging American industrial wealth with European aristocratic lineage. The arrangement had just one significant flaw. Consuelo had absolutely no desire to marry the Duke. She had fallen for Winthrop Rutherford, a young American man, but Alva would not be denied her aristocratic son-in-law. According to historical accounts, she effectively imprisoned her daughter, threatened to shoot Rutherford, and claimed she would die of a heart attack if Consuelo refused to marry the Duke. Maternal manipulation that would make modern therapists fill entire journals. This created a situation dripping with irony. Alva, recently divorced and socially ostracized, was orchestrating one of the Gilded Age's most prestigious marriages. William reportedly spent $10 million on the arrangement, essentially matching Alva's divorce settlement. The Duke, for his part, made no pretense about his motivation, openly seeking Consuelo's substantial dowry to renovate his ancestral home, Blenheim Palace. While arranging her daughter's unwanted marriage, Alva was cultivating a relationship that would soon provide her social redemption. Her connection to Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont, whether it began before or after her divorce, was evolving beyond friendship. As New York society was still reeling from the divorce scandal, Alva was preparing yet another social grenade that would explode convention and complete her remarkable comeback. The woman who had rewritten society's rules was about to prove that even divorce couldn't stop her social dominance, and in doing so, would create a template for wealthy women's independence that would help reshape American society. Just when society thought Alva had exhausted her capacity for scandal, she pulled her most audacious move yet. In January 1896, barely 10 months after her divorce, she married Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont. Society matrons who had just finished clutching their pearls over the divorce now found themselves in need of smelling salts. Gossip erupted like Mount Vesuvius about how long this relationship had existed. Rumours dating back to 1888 suggested William had once discovered Belmont hiding in a closet in their home, a social faux pas slightly more serious than using the wrong fork at dinner. William allegedly used this discovery to justify his own extramarital activities, creating a marital standoff of mutual infidelity among the elite. Whether these rumours were founded or not, Alva's remarriage accomplished something remarkable. It restored her social standing with the efficiency of a magic trick. As Mrs. Belmont, she was mysteriously acceptable in the very drawing rooms that had banned her as a divorced woman. She became mistress of Belcourt Castle, Belmont's enormous Newport mansion, giving her 2 palatial Newport residences within strolling distance, a real estate portfolio that would make modern billionaires envious. For Alva, the restoration was complete, but for Consuelo, married life was proving less than fairy tale perfect. The Duke of Marlborough, having secured his American dollars, showed little interest in the American bride attached to them. The marriage that had cost William $10 million and Consuelo her happiness would eventually end in separation in 1960 and formal divorce in 1921. The defining transformation in Alva's life came in 1908 when Oliver Belmont died, leaving her a wealthy widow. Rather than retreating into conventional mourning, she underwent a metamorphosis as dramatic as a butterfly, emerging from a chrysalis made of dollar bills, from social climber to social reformer. She embraced women's suffrage with the same tactical brilliance she had once applied to storming Mrs. Astor's ballroom. In 1909, she opened Marble House, once a monument to her social ambition, for a suffrage symposium and founded the Political Equality League to support pro-suffrage politicians. The woman who had once spent millions on marble palaces now redirected her resources toward securing the vote for women. Her conversion to the cause wasn't merely fashionable dabbling. In 1912, she led the Political Equality Division of the Women's Vote Parade in New York City. By 1916, she had co-founded the National Woman's Party with Alice Paul, organizing White House picketing campaigns that brought unprecedented attention to the suffrage movement. The strategic genius that had once orchestrated the legendary 1883 costume ball now planned political demonstrations with equal effectiveness. Just as she had forced Mrs. Astor to acknowledge her by hosting an irresistible event, she now pressured politicians through carefully orchestrated campaigns. She served as the National Woman's Party's president until 1933 and purchased its headquarters in Washington, D.C., now preserved as the Belmont Paul Women's Equality National Monument. Alva's wealth, derived from both her Vanderbilt divorce settlement and Belmont inheritance, made her the primary financial engine behind the militant wing of the suffrage movement. The financial independence her divorce had secured enabled her to fund controversial tactics without fear of economic reprisal. In January 1917, she organized the first White House picketing campaign, resulting in numerous arrests that generated valuable publicity for the cause. While Alva reinvented herself as a suffragist, William retreated to France, built a chateau in Normandy, established a horse racing stable near Deauville, and remarried Anne Harriman in 1903. He died in 1920, leaving a legacy primarily connected to his wealth and racing interests rather than social or political impact. Alva's remarkable transformation from Gilded Age social climber to pioneering suffragist contributed significantly to the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920, and she continued advocating for women's equality until her death in Paris in 1933. Her scandalous divorce, once seen as social suicide, ultimately provided the independence and resources that enabled her most significant contributions to American society. The woman who had once built marble monuments to social ambition ultimately helped build something far more lasting, a more equal America. In 1911, a mining heiress with more courage than caution purchased the world's most notorious diamond. The 45-carat blue stone had already left a trail of broken lives across continents. French kings beheaded, millionaires bankrupted, royalty driven mad. But Evalyn Walsh McLean, daughter of Colorado Gold, merely laughed at tales of ancient curses. She let her Great Dane wear the Hope Diamond like a trinket and flaunted it at baseball games, declaring herself immune to its dark history. Within decades, she would bury 2 of her children, watch her husband descend into madness, lose her family fortune, and discover, perhaps too late, why centuries of owners had feared the seductive blue light at the heart of her precious gem. In the rugged San Juan Mountains of Colorado, where prospectors sought their fortunes in the late 1800s, Thomas Walsh made the discovery that would transform his family's future. The Camp Bird mine, rich with gold and silver veins, proved to be one of the most profitable discoveries of the era, elevating the Walsh family from modest means to extraordinary wealth during America's Gilded Age. Born in 1886, Evalyn Walsh's early years coincided with her family's remarkable rise in fortune. Her father's journey from Irish immigrant to wealthy mine owner embodied the American dream, taking place during a time when new industrial fortunes were reshaping the nation's social landscape. Thomas Walsh's success meant that his daughter would grow up in circumstances far different from his own humble beginnings. The Walsh family's newfound wealth opened doors that would have been firmly closed to them just years before. Thomas Walsh, mindful of his daughter's future, invested in her education in Washington, D.C., where the family eventually established their residence. This move from the mining towns of Colorado to the nation's capital marked a significant transition in young Evalyn's life. As she grew older, Evalyn's world expanded beyond the western frontier of her early childhood. The family's relocation to Washington, D.C. placed them at the heart of American society and politics. Here, among the established families of the capital, the Walshes made their mark not just through their mining fortune, but through their active participation in the city's social and cultural life. It was in this environment that Evalyn met Edward Ned McLean, heir to the Washington Post publishing empire. Their courtship captured public attention, representing a union between 2 of America's prominent families. The impending marriage promised to combine the Walsh mining fortune with the McLean publishing empire, creating a union of considerable social and financial significance. Their 1908 wedding reflected the scale of both families' wealth. Each set of parents gave the couple $100,000 to purchase their own wedding presents, an extraordinary sum for the time that demonstrated both families' immense prosperity. The gesture spoke to the magnitude of wealth that would shape Evalyn's adult life and influence her future decisions. As the newlyweds embarked on their life together, neither could have anticipated how their future would become entwined with one of history's most famous gems. 2 years after their wedding, in 1910, they would encounter Pierre Cartier, a French jeweller who possessed a remarkable blue diamond. The 45.52-carat stone known as the Hope Diamond would soon capture Evalyn's imagination. The circumstances that would bring this extraordinary gem into Evalyn's possession and the role it would play in her life were about to unfold. As she stood on the threshold of her new life as Mrs. McLean, Evalyn was entering a chapter that would define not just her own story, but the next stage in the Hope Diamond's long and storied journey through history. The first 2 years of Evalyn and Ned McLean's marriage unfolded against the backdrop of America's wealthiest social circles. With their combined family fortunes, the young couple enjoyed a lifestyle of exceptional privilege, dividing their time between Washington, D.C.'s social season and extended travels abroad. In 1910, while the McLeans were staying at their Paris hotel, Pierre Cartier arranged a meeting to show them an extraordinary gem, the Hope Diamond. Cartier, already renowned as a jeweller to European royalty and American millionaires, had recently acquired the stone and recognised the McLeans as potential buyers who could afford such a significant purchase. The 45.52-carat deep blue diamond that Cartier presented was distinctive not only for its size and colour, but also for its documented history of royal ownership. It had been part of the French crown jewels until the French Revolution, after which it disappeared for decades, eventually resurfacing in England in the 1830s when it was acquired by Henry Philip Hope, from whom it derived its current name. Through subsequent sales and inheritances, it had finally come into Cartier's possession. The meeting marked the beginning of what would become a lengthy negotiation process. The Hope Diamond's unusual cushion cut and rare blue colour made it a unique piece, unlike anything else available in the market. While stories circulated about the stone bringing misfortune to its owners, these tales were part of the complex history Cartier shared with the McLeans during their discussions. The proposed price of $180,000 represented a significant investment, even for the wealthy McLeans. Ned McLean initially expressed reservations about the purchase, although he would eventually support his wife's decision to acquire the stone. The negotiation process would extend beyond their initial meeting, as both parties worked to reach terms that would satisfy everyone involved. The diamond's journey to that point had been remarkable. After disappearing during the French Revolution, it had passed through several hands before reaching Cartier. Each transfer of ownership added another layer to its already rich history, making it not just a precious gem, but a piece of tangible history. From the French royal family to Henry Philip Hope, and through subsequent owners, the diamond had travelled across continents and through the hands of some of Europe's most notable collectors. As 1910 drew to a close, the Hope Diamond remained in Cartier's possession, but discussions about its sale to the McLeans continued. The negotiations would stretch into the following year, with various factors influencing the final decision. The complex discussions involved not just the price, but also considerations about the stone's setting and presentation. The question that hung in the balance wasn't simply whether the McLeans would acquire this remarkable blue diamond, but how this potential purchase might impact their lives. Little did they know that their decision would link their name permanently with one of history's most famous gems, creating a connection that would far outlast their own lifetimes. In 1911, after months of negotiations, the Hope Diamond finally changed hands. The McLeans purchased the extraordinary blue stone from Cartier for $180,000, a sum equivalent to several $1 million today. This acquisition marked the beginning of a new chapter in the diamond's long history. The 45.52-carat blue diamond was reset by Cartier into a versatile headpiece that could also be worn as a pendant. This new setting allowed Evalyn to showcase the stone in various ways at social gatherings. She integrated the Hope Diamond into her life with a casualness that contrasted sharply with its royal history and immense value. In one of her more notable displays of this informal attitude, she occasionally allowed her Great Dane to wear the diamond. The early years of Evalyn's ownership of the Hope Diamond coincided with a period of significant social and political change in Washington, D.C. World War I would soon reshape the international landscape, and the McLeans' position at the intersection of media and society through their ownership of the Washington Post placed them at the centre of these transformative events. However, the family's prominent position and extraordinary wealth couldn't shield them from personal tragedy. In 1919, the McLeans suffered their first major loss when their 9-year-old son, Vincent, was struck by a car and killed. This devastating event marked the beginning of a series of personal challenges that would test Evalyn's strength in the years to come. The Hope Diamond remained a significant part of Evalyn's life through both prosperous times and periods of hardship. Like many wealthy Americans, she would later face financial challenges during the Great Depression, even temporarily pawning the diamond during this difficult period. Yet throughout her decades of ownership, she maintained a special connection to the stone that distinguished her from its previous owners. As the 1920s approached, the McLeans' lives appeared to be following diverging paths. Ned's behaviour became increasingly erratic, marked by growing problems with alcohol and gambling that would strain their marriage. Meanwhile, Evalyn continued to maintain her position in Washington society, with the Hope Diamond serving as a constant presence in her life. The next decade would bring more changes and challenges for Evalyn Walsh McLean. The Roaring Twenties were about to begin, ushering in an era of unprecedented social change and economic expansion. Yet beneath the surface of this apparent prosperity, forces were at work that would test both her fortune and her spirit. The 1920s brought dramatic changes to American society, and the McLeans were not immune to the era's turbulent currents. While the decade began with the glittering excess of the Roaring Twenties, it would end with decisions and events that would fundamentally alter Evalyn's life. Ned McLean's struggles with alcohol and gambling intensified during this period, putting increasing strain on both their marriage and their finances. The situation reached a breaking point in 1927 when Evalyn separated from her husband. Despite their social prominence and the public nature of their positions as owners of the Washington Post, private troubles could no longer be contained within the walls of their mansion. The stock market crash of 1929 ushered in the Great Depression, bringing new financial challenges. Even the wealthy McLeans felt the impact of these difficult economic times. In a move that demonstrated how dire circumstances had become, Evalyn temporarily pawned the Hope Diamond during this period. This decision, likely difficult for someone who had maintained such a close connection to the stone, reflected the economic realities of the era. The 1930s brought even more significant changes. In 1933, Ned McLean was declared legally insane and committed to a mental hospital. That same year, the Washington Post, which had been in the McLean family for decades, was sold as part of the settlement of Edward McLean's estate. The newspaper that had been such a significant part of their family's identity and influence passed into new hands. Throughout these upheavals, Evalyn maintained her presence in Washington society, though in altered circumstances. The Hope Diamond, when not in pawn, remained a constant in her life. While many of her contemporaries faced similar financial reversals during the Depression, Evalyn's experience was particularly public due to her social prominence and connection to the famous Bluestone. The changes in Evalyn's life during this period reflected larger transformations in American society. The economic devastation of the Depression had reshaped the landscape of American wealth, and many formerly secure fortunes proved vulnerable to the harsh economic conditions. The sale of the Washington Post marked the end of an era not just for the McLean family, but for a certain style of newspaper ownership in America. As the 1930s progressed, Evalyn faced her challenges with the same spirit that had characterized her earlier years. While her life had changed dramatically from the days when she first acquired the Hope Diamond, she maintained her distinctive personality and social connections. The diamond, which had witnessed the fall of French royalty and the transformation of European society, now observed the reshaping of American wealth and society through the experiences of its owner. The years ahead would bring more changes for Evalyn Walsh McLean. Her ex-husband remained institutionalized, and the future held both additional sorrows and moments of strength. As she moved into the next phase of her life, the Hope Diamond would continue to play a unique role in her story, leading toward decisions that would ultimately determine the fate of this remarkable stone. The 1940s brought significant endings in the story of Evalyn Walsh McLean and the Hope Diamond. In 1941, Ned McLean died in the mental hospital where he had spent his final years. Though they had long been separated, his death marked the conclusion of a significant chapter in Evalyn's life, one that had begun with such promise at their 1908 wedding. The Hope Diamond remained in Evalyn's possession until her death, having been her companion through decades of dramatic change in both her personal life and the wider world. The jewel that had travelled from French royalty through various European collections had now been in Evalyn's possession longer than any other private owner. During her ownership, the stone had transformed from a piece of jewellery into something more, a tangible link to history and a symbol of endurance through challenging times. In 1947, Evalyn Walsh McLean passed away at the age of 60. Her life had spanned an extraordinary period in American history, from the mining fortunes of the Gilded Age through 2 world wars and the Great Depression. She had outlived her ex-husband and 2 of her children, enduring personal tragedies while maintaining her distinctive spirit. After her death, the Hope Diamond found a new path. The stone was sold to Harry Winston Inc., marking the end of its longest period of private ownership. Winston would display the famous diamond for the next decade as part of his Court of Jewels exhibition, travelling throughout the United States. Finally, in 1958, he donated it to the Smithsonian Institution, where it has remained ever since. Today, the Hope Diamond rests in the National Museum of Natural History, where millions of visitors each year pause to admire its deep blue brilliance. Its setting has been modified several times since Evalyn's day, but the stone itself remains unchanged, a tribute to both natural wonder and human history. The diamond's permanent home in the Smithsonian represents a remarkable final chapter in its long journey. The stone that once adorned French kings, that travelled through centuries of private collections, and that spent its longest period of private ownership with Evalyn, now belongs to the American public. In its secure display case, rotating slowly under carefully controlled lights, the Hope Diamond continues to captivate audiences just as it once captivated the mining heiress who owned it for over 3 decades.